I had just stepped back into my house after a 10-day trip, my legs still numb from the overnight flight, when I heard a sentence that froze me in place at the kitchen doorway. "Leave her down there. We'll finish it tomorrow." Madison's voice. Calm. Cold enough to make me wonder if I'd misheard her. I didn't see Linda anywhere. No warm greeting like she always gave me. Only the faint clinking of metal from somewhere beneath the floor, like someone tapping weakly against a door. I walked slowly toward the wine cellar door, something I had never locked, let alone fitted with a brand new electronic lock. When I pressed my palm against it, I heard ragged breathing, Linda's breathing. I unlocked it. But what made my stomach drop wasn't that Linda had been locked inside. It was the wooden sign propped beside the cellar, clearly showing the house transfer date tomorrow. And that was only the beginning of what my son had done behind my back, something that could destroy not only Linda, but my entire life. If you're still here, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts, and if it moved you, give it a like so others can find it too. I flipped on all the basement lights and rushed down. Linda was curled in a corner, her favorite cardigan coated with a thin layer of dust, hair tangled, hands shaking like late fall leaves hanging on in Ohio. When she saw me, her eyes opened, squinting as if she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "Engineer?" She called me by the nickname from our younger years. Linda only used that name when she was terrified or mentally shaken. I had just stepped back into my house after a 10-day trip, my legs still numb from the overnight flight, when I heard a sentence that froze me in place at the kitchen doorway. "Leave her down there. We'll finish it tomorrow." Madison's voice. Calm, cold enough to make me wonder if I'd misheard her. I didn't see Linda anywhere. No warm greeting like she always gave me. Only the faint clinking of metal from somewhere beneath the floor, like someone tapping weakly against a door. I walked slowly toward the wine cellar door, something I had never locked, let alone fitted with a brand new electronic lock. When I pressed my palm against it, I heard ragged breathing, Linda's breathing. I unlocked it. But what made my stomach drop wasn't that Linda had been locked inside. It was the wooden sign propped beside the cellar, clearly showing the house transfer date tomorrow. And that was only the beginning of what my son had done behind my back, something that could destroy not only Linda, but my entire life. I knelt beside her, placing my hand on her shoulder. "It's me. It's Harold, Linda." She hesitated, then clutched my arm like a drowning person grabbing a life preserver. I held her, feeling the cold radiating from skin that was always warm. I knew she hadn't been down here for 1 or 2 hours. It had been days. I helped her up the stairs. Each step looked like a battle, as if her legs no longer obeyed her body. In the living room, Linda sagged onto the sofa, gasping for air. I hurried to get her water. When I came back, she was glancing around, confused. "They said I was bothering you. They said I had to sign papers so you wouldn't worry." I froze. Who told her that? What papers? Before I could ask, I noticed something strange. Furniture had been moved. The wall clock that always hung near the fireplace was now beside my old piano. The leather chairs had been pulled apart as if someone had been measuring them. Several family photos were placed face down. A few taped cardboard boxes sat near the window, the type you use when preparing to move. Why? My home had never been messy or rearranged. I'd only been gone 10 days. Linda leaned back, her eyes dull. She whispered like she feared her own words. "They didn't let me call you." My chest tightened. They? Evan? My son? Or Madison, my daughter-in-law? Before I could ask, the front door clicked open. Evan and Madison walked in. Madison froze when she saw me. "Oh, you're home early." Evan stiffened for 2 seconds before forcing a smile. "Dad, you didn't tell us." I didn't answer. I just sat next to Linda, placing my hand firmly on her shoulder, claiming space, saying without words that she was with me, not them. Madison rushed over, acting perfectly frantic. She would have fooled me if I didn't already know the truth. "Oh my gosh, Linda, I thought you were napping. What were you doing in the basement? Why did you lock yourself in?" I stared straight into her eyes. A flicker of fear flashed in them before disappearing. Evan jumped in, voice a little too loud. "She wandered off and got stuck. You know how she is, Dad." "No, Linda never went into the cellar alone. She hated dark places." I stood up and walked toward the trash can near the kitchen. I always tossed a banana peel in there before heading to the airport, but today, something else was inside. A blister pack of strong sedatives. No prescription, no label, not the medication Linda used. Back in the kitchen, I saw Linda's Alzheimer's medication. Gone. "Where's her medicine?" I asked. Evan waved a hand. I switched her to something better. Her doctor approved it. Evan had never met Linda's doctor alone, and Linda's doctor would never approve heavy sedatives without me present. He was lying. Linda tugged at my sleeve. "They gave me something so bitter, then I slept and slept." My throat tightened. Madison cut in sharply. "She's confused, Dad. Don't believe random things she says." I didn't answer. I just stayed beside Linda, keeping my hand on her shoulder. Linda's eyes shifted away whenever Evan moved closer, as if she feared her own son. When Evan walked to the kitchen, I noticed a set of new keys hanging on the wall. The cellar key was there, shiny, brand new, nothing like the one I'd always used. "Why the electronic lock?" I asked. "We've never locked that door." Madison gave a sweet laugh, though it hit my ears like a blade. "She keeps wandering down there." We didn't want her falling down the stairs. Another lie. That staircase had dual handrails, non-slip steps, and motion sensor lighting. I sat down beside Linda, brushing the back of her cold hand, once the hand I held every evening while we watched the news together. "How long were you down there, Linda?" I whispered. Linda looked down. Her voice trembled. "I don't remember, but I was scared." Then she leaned toward me and whispered, fearful someone else might hear, "They told me to sign something, so you wouldn't have to worry." But I didn't understand. A cold shiver crept up my spine. Sign what? Who forced her, and why? Evan returned, clapping his hands lightly like trying to brighten the mood. "Dad, you should rest. We'll talk about selling the house later. The new place will make caregiving easier." Selling the house? My house? Tomorrow? I glanced again at the wooden sign near the cellar door. Transfer date. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. My heart sank. I looked at Evan and Madison. Then I pretended to sigh, to be tired, to give in. "All right, we'll figure it out tomorrow." Madison smiled faintly. Evan's shoulders eased. They believed I'd softened. But when they turned away, I looked at Linda. The fear in her eyes told me everything. She hadn't just been neglected. She had been locked away, controlled, manipulated, and the people who did it were my own son and daughter-in-law. I squeezed Linda's hand, whispering, "Don't worry, I'll find out what they've done." That night, I lay in bed without sleeping a single minute. Every sound made me open my eyes. Every step Evan took down the hall made me tense. From this moment on, I wasn't just a husband protecting his wife. I was a father forced to fight against his own child, and this story was only beginning. The next morning, I woke before dawn. Linda was asleep in the armchair by the window, her breathing thin and fragile. I tucked a light blanket over her and walked quietly to my office. I hadn't slept, and Linda's trembling whisper kept echoing in my mind. They made me sign, so you wouldn't worry. The office door was cracked open, as if someone had just been inside. I turned on the light and went straight to the safe hidden under the file cabinet. For 30 years, only Linda and I knew the combination. I opened it, my heart dropping. The folder with the house deed was gone. The life insurance paperwork gone. The retirement account documents gone. Only old tax returns and an old construction notebook remained. I sat down, gripping the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Linda couldn't have taken them. Evan. He knew where the safe was. I had never imagined he would open it without permission. Trying not to panic, I turned on my computer and checked our accounts. An error message popped up. I called the support line. The representative spoke gently. Mr. Burns, we're holding a large transaction from your wife's linked account. It appears she initiated an unusual transfer. Linda couldn't use a computer. Her phone was taken away. How could she transfer money? How much? I asked. A large withdrawal from your savings. We're pausing it to verify with the authorized party. Authorized party? Yes, the legal power of attorney under Evan Burns. My grip tightened on the phone until my joints cracked. I had never signed any power of attorney paperwork. And Linda, she wasn't capable of understanding anything complex right now. My eyes blurred. Can you send me a copy? Of course. And just to confirm, your family never filed for this authorization. I swallowed hard. Never. And my wife is not competent to sign anything. A pause. Sir, you need to notify your primary bank and the authorities immediately. I hung up, hands still shaking. I walked into the living room and looked at the security camera on the wall. The signal light was off. I climbed a chair and checked its hard drive had been pulled out. Evan was the only one who knew the breaker panel code. The house felt unnervingly quiet, the clock ticking loud, like marking all the time I'd been gone, enough time for everything to unfold behind my back. Linda was awake now, staring blankly. Harold, the other day, they took me somewhere with a blue sign. A man gave me papers, said sign to protect our house. I can't remember well. She pressed her fingers to her temples, trying to reach a memory slipping away. Do you remember who took you? I asked gently. Evan and Madison came too. They said you were tired, so I had to help. I inhaled deeply. Linda didn't know she'd been used. Upstairs, I searched Evan's room and quickly found a photocopy of the power of attorney. I opened it and stared at the signature, shaky, uneven, slanted, like someone who wasn't fully aware of what they were signing. Not Linda's handwriting. I'd known her script for more than 40 years. A knock behind me. Evan. What are you doing in here, Dad? I hid the photocopy under other documents. Had a question about the savings account. He avoided my eyes. Mom agreed. I'm just helping manage things. You need to rest. Agreed. Agreed. I repeated quietly. Yeah, I'm just helping. His lie came out smooth, too smooth. All morning, I asked small questions, testing him. Evan tried to act calm, but his shoulders were tense, his hands shoved too deep into his pockets. After lunch, I called the bank again. They confirmed Evan had submitted the power of attorney 3 days earlier. Everything is valid with your wife's signature, they said. I hung up slowly. 10 days. Just 10 days away, and they'd built an entire plan. Open the safe, steal documents, drag Linda to sign authority papers, move money, and prepare to sell the house. Linda sat in the kitchen cutting an apple, trying her best to act normal, and I realized she had no idea she was at the center of an elaborate scheme. Evan came in again, softer this time. "Dad, you're tired. It's time I handle the finances." I gave him a smile that never reached my eyes. "You're right. I'll let you help." His face lit up. He thought I had yielded. But the moment he walked away, I looked at Linda, my partner through all of life's storms, her memory fading by the day, and I knew one thing with absolute certainty. I had to stay sharp. I had to watch Evan closely, and I could not reveal a single doubt. When Evan and Madison left to get things for dinner, I took Linda to Dr. Collins on Maple Street. I told her we were going for some fresh air. She nodded. Maybe she just wanted to get out of that house. Dr. Collins saw Linda for 1 minute before realizing something was wrong. After tests, he told me Linda was clearly malnourished, mildly dehydrated, and under long-term stress. He asked if I'd changed her diet or medication. I shook my head. "Harold, she didn't end up like this on her own. She hasn't been properly cared for." I didn't explain I wasn't ready. Linda sat nearby drawing circles on a scrap of paper, her hand trembling. When we left the clinic, I called Daryl, my old friend, a seasoned lawyer. I told him everything: the missing documents, the strange transfer, the suspicious power of attorney. He sighed. "Harold, this sounds like either a forged POA or someone exploiting Linda's confusion. You need to be extremely careful. If they've gotten one signature, they'll try for more." That sealed my decision. I needed to pretend I knew nothing. If I confronted Evan, he would speed everything up. But if I acted weak, they would slip. When we got home, I smiled at Evan like nothing had happened. "You were right. Finances really do wear me out." His eyes brightened like a child being rewarded. He thought he'd won. In the evening, we had dinner together at the long table. Linda barely ate anything, her movements slow. I served food onto her plate, while Madison whispered to Evan across from us. Her voice was soft enough that she must have thought I couldn't hear, but the kitchen was so quiet and the warm lights were off, making every sound drift closer. Only 48 hours left. If we finish early, we'll move on Monday. I pretended to clear my throat to cover my sharp intake of breath. Evan glanced at me as if trying to gauge whether I had heard anything, then forced a thin smile and raised his voice. "Dad, tomorrow I'll take you to see the new retirement apartment. Neat, safe. You won't have to worry about anything." I nodded, acting tired, pressing my hand to my forehead like a man who truly needed his son to take over. But that night, after they went upstairs, I planted a mini recorder under the fruit basket in the kitchen. Evan and Madison's voices kept drifting down from the second floor, and I didn't want to miss a single word. Linda stepped out of the bedroom, hugging her cardigan close like she was cold. She looked around and whispered to me, her voice tight as if holding back tears. "Evan took my phone. They said, 'I bother you when I call. I don't want to bother you.'" I put my arm around her. "You never bother me. Not ever." She leaned into me as if she would collapse if I let go. Around midnight, I heard Evan talking on the phone downstairs. He thought I was asleep because I had purposely turned on a faint fake snoring sound from my room. "Tomorrow night, exactly 8 p.m. I want everything done fast. He's getting softer. If he won't sign, we'll do it another way." Another way? Those words echoed in my head. I stood behind my bedroom door, my back pressed against the wall, afraid to move. Since Linda was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I always thought the worst thing that could happen was the disease progressing quickly. But now, something far worse was coming from my own flesh and blood, whom I had raised for nearly 4 decades. The next morning, Evan brought a real estate agent to see the house, without asking me. When I walked down the stairs, Evan quickly blocked me. "Dad, you're tired. Let me handle this." I gave a thin smile, rubbing my temples as if everything felt like a burden. "Go ahead." The agent walked through the living room, taking notes. Unaware that this house was the place where Linda and I once stayed up late decorating for Christmas when Evan was just a tiny boy, yet now it was being treated like an item ready to be sold off. That hurt more than any punch could. That night, I lay beside Linda, listening to her murmur in her sleep, drifting in and out of moments of clarity. She gripped my hand weak, but tighter than I expected. "Don't let them take me, Harold." I squeezed her hand gently. "I'm here. I won't let anyone hurt you. I promise." In the dark, I heard Evan's footsteps moving slowly along the hallway, the faint clink of a spoon against a cup from downstairs, and Madison's voice quietly saying, "The longer we wait, the bigger the risk. He's not as clueless as you think." Evan chuckled. "If he doesn't sign tomorrow, I have a way to make him sign." That sentence sent a cold jolt through my whole body. I understood then. They didn't just want money. They were willing to go further past every moral boundary to finish their plan. And because of that, I couldn't just sit and watch anymore. From that moment, I knew I had to step into a battle I never imagined. I would fight against my own son. The next morning, I waited until Evan brought Linda down to the kitchen, then used the excuse of looking for the scissors to go upstairs. I knew I didn't have much time. The 48 hours Madison mentioned kept echoing in my head like a countdown clock. Madison's handbag sat beside her vanity. I unzipped it quietly, not to invade someone's privacy, but because I was trying to save my wife from a trap my own son had built. I searched every small pocket: lipstick, mirror, car keys, random receipts, then a stiff yellow envelope. The moment I touched it, a chill spread across my back. Inside was a loan contract for $200,000. Borrower: Harold J. Burns. Signature: Harold Burns. I stared at that handwriting for a long time. Some strokes looked frighteningly similar. They must have practiced. But they didn't know that every time I signed my name, I slanted the last stroke downward just a little. On this one, the stroke was perfectly straight, too clean, too neat to be natural. I stayed calm, or at least tried. My hands trembled, but I put everything back exactly where it was. I needed to keep playing the role of the tired old man so Evan wouldn't get suspicious. As I was leaving the SES room, I noticed Madison's laptop was still open, the screen faintly glowing. I stepped closer. A string of emails appeared, sent by someone named Harlan T. Greaves. I knew that name. Harlan was behind a small Ponzi scheme that made local news 2 years ago. I had seen his photo in the paper: long, wavy hair, a smile that felt like it carved into people. The kind of man who preyed on families with money and chaos, trying to lure them into investing. In the emails, Madison kept asking, "When can we move the money? Harold is starting to loosen up. We'll sell the house fast. We priced it low, like you said." Priced it low? I opened the attached file. An appraisal of my house, nearly 40% below market value. Cheap enough to sell quickly, easy enough to cash out, convenient enough to hide anything suspicious. I stood still for a long time. This house, the place where Linda and I had lived since Evan was a boy, running circles in the backyard, was being valued like clearance merchandise, all to serve a scheme without conscience. I went downstairs feeling heavy. Linda was drinking tea, her eyes dull as if trying to hold on to a fading memory. I sat beside her and gently asked, "Linda, do you remember who gave you the medicine?" She frowned, then whispered, "They said it's new medicine." I took it. I kept sleeping. Couldn't wake up. I was scared. I saw a small bruise on her wrist, maybe from being held down when she panicked. My heart clenched. I checked the trash behind the kitchen. Under the plastic bag was an empty white pill box, no label, no prescription, no manufacturer info. I stared at it. This wasn't Alzheimer's medication. It wasn't anything she had ever taken. Something stronger, strong enough to keep her knocked out for days, too drained to resist, and most importantly, unable to call me. Suddenly, Evan's voice sounded behind me. "Dad, what are you doing?" I turned, keeping my face neutral. "Looking for the lid. The fruit container fell yesterday." Evan looked at me longer than usual, his eyes probing mine, as if trying to read every thought in my head. "You're recovering fast." I gave a weak smile. "That medicine you gave her must be helping me too." He didn't fully believe it, but he let it go for now. That afternoon, I called the bank and asked to temporarily freeze all transactions until I could verify them myself. I knew I was only buying time. They might have already taken a lot, and they had. When I checked the secondary savings account, $40,000 had been withdrawn 3 days earlier. I didn't even feel shock anymore, just an empty, spreading ache. I leaned against the kitchen cabinet and watched Linda trace the flowers on the tablecloth like a child. She didn't know what $40,000 meant, didn't know the house was about to be sold, didn't know Evan was deceiving his own parents, didn't know our life was being torn apart piece by piece. Then I heard Evan in the living room, speaking quietly, just loud enough for me. "He's old, easy. If he won't sign, we still have another option." I closed my eyes. The pulse in my temple pounded, but my voice stayed calm, the outward calm I had forced myself to maintain through these days. I understood. What was coming would not be gentle. And my family, the family I once believed unbreakable, was standing on the edge of a storm only I could stop, even if it meant facing my own son. If you're still listening to this story and feel that same ache when a father discovers his own signature was forged to steal everything he built, tell me where you're watching from in the comments below, or share even the smallest thought so I know we're walking this path together. Since the night I found Madison's emails and the forged loan contract in her bag, Linda had begun having long nightmares. Anytime she heard a door lock, she jolted awake, eyes wide like she'd just escaped from somewhere dark. One night she grabbed my collar, her voice shaking. "Don't let them take me down there again. Harold, don't leave me alone." I held her shoulders, soothing her with the softest voice I could manage. But every time a lock clicked, even if it was just Madison closing the fridge or Evan locking the garage, Linda curled up like a wounded bird searching for the smallest hiding place. Madison's irritation grew more obvious. Whenever Linda's trembling hands dropped a spoon or she stepped slowly out of the room, Madison muttered, "She's exaggerating. I don't see anything wrong." Once, she even looked me straight in the eye and said, half smiling, "Mother's trying to get attention, Harold. Don't indulge it." I stared at her long enough that she finally looked away. I knew Linda wasn't pretending she was living in real fear, inside the home she had loved her whole life. Around noon, Evan walked in with a sharply dressed man. "Dad, This is Mark. He's going to help us look at a few better options for the future." Without explanation, I knew Mark was a real estate agent. His handshake was quick and firm, the kind used by people always in a rush to close a deal. I kept my tone calm. "What options, son?" Evan slung an overly friendly arm around Mark. "Don't worry. I just want you and Mom somewhere quieter. This house is too big, too much maintenance." I looked around. Every corner held a memory. The wooden cabinet I built the year we moved in. The floral curtains Linda chose on a trip to Indiana. The crayon marks Evan made on the wall at 6 years old that I couldn't bear to fully erase. Now they were suddenly too big and too troublesome. While Mark flipped through his notebook, he said, "Your son mentioned you've started forgetting things. A safer place might be better." I froze. Evan had said that? The man who built the garage. Himself, who remembered every one of Linda's appointments, who still did our taxes, was being described as a confused old man who couldn't manage his own life. Mark realized he'd slipped and looked down quickly. But the sentence lingered in my chest like a cold needle. Suddenly, I understood. Evan didn't just want money. He wanted to strip me of my legal capacity. Once I was labeled forgetful, he could sign for me, decide for me, control everything. That night, after they went to bed, I gathered every document: the forged loan contract, the suspicious POA, emails about undervaluing the house, the audio recordings, the photo of the unmarked sedative box. I saved them all onto a USB, then hid it at the bottom of an old domino box in the garage somewhere Evan would never touch. Darkness came quicker than usual. I sat beside Linda, combing her silver hair. She turned toward me, her eyes a blend of sadness and fear. "Harold, I don't want to stay with Evan anymore. I'm scared. The way he looks at me, it's different." I had never heard Linda speak of our son that way. I held her as her thin shoulders trembled. That night, I had her sleep in my room. I locked the door from the inside, not because I thought Evan would act immediately, but because Linda needed to feel safe. I left the nightlight on. She held my hand all night. Close to midnight, I heard slow footsteps outside. Evan. He stopped right in front of my door. Then, tap. A soft knock on the wall. Not knocking to enter, checking if I was asleep. I didn't move. Linda curled closer, and I placed my hand on her back to comfort her. After a while, Evan walked away. His steps faded down the stairs, but my heart didn't settle. I lay still in the dark, feeling Linda's breath against my shoulder, and knew they were going to act, almost certainly, and maybe within days. Those 48 hours Evan and Madison mentioned were slipping away. This house, the place where I once felt safest, had become a silent battleground, where every breath carried tension. And I, a man who had lived through more than 70 winters, would have to be sharper than ever in my life. For Linda, and for my dignity as a husband and a father. That morning, before the sun had fully risen, I heard Linda moving in the kitchen. I stepped out, ready to greet her like always, when she turned toward me, with an unfamiliar look that froze me in place. "Who are you?" Her voice trembled, as if she was speaking to a stranger who'd walked into her home. It felt like someone dropped a stone straight into my chest. "Linda, it's me." I reached out, but she backed away, clutching the dish towel like a tiny shield. Just a moment later, her eyes softened as if something familiar flickered back. "Harold, I'm sorry. My mind feels strange." I held her trembling hand, a hand so cold it felt almost unreal. In that moment, I realized the damage she had suffered was deeper than I imagined. Linda wasn't just afraid, she had been traumatized so severely that her memory was collapsing into empty spaces. Later that morning, Madison walked downstairs with her coffee, her usual cold expression in place. She glanced at Linda, sitting dazed at the table, then said to me in an overly casual tone dripping with pretense, "If Linda keeps acting like this, it's better for her to stay upstairs with me. Easier to take care of." I knew exactly what easier to take care of meant. She wanted to separate Linda from me, control her more easily. "No," I said firmly. "Linda stays with me." Madison lifted an eyebrow. "Harold, you're making this harder than it needs to be." Before I could respond, Evan walked in, catching the tail end of the conversation. "Dad," he said, irritation flaring in his voice, "everything is messy enough already. Don't make it harder for us." I looked at him a long time. My son, the boy I raised, taught manners, taught right from wrong, was talking to me like I was a burden. I only answered with a faint smile. If I lost my temper, everything would explode. At noon, when they went out shopping, I hurried to gather all the evidence: screenshots of emails, the forged loan contract, the undervalued appraisal, the kitchen recordings, the photo of the unmarked sedatives. I copied everything onto a USB, then called Daryl. "Daryl, it's sent. Keep a copy. And no matter what happens, don't let them near Linda." A brief silence on the other end, then, "I understand. Stay calm. I'm here." Late in the afternoon, Linda rested her head on my shoulder, her voice barely a whisper. "Harold, I remember, they left me hungry. I called out, but no one came. I thought I was going to die." I placed my hand over hers. "You're safe now, I promise." Linda couldn't remember every event, but the sensations remained sharp as blades: hunger, fear, cold, abandonment. Those things carved themselves deeper than any image ever could. That night, when Evan thought I was asleep, I heard his voice in the living room. "No, don't delay it any longer. Push the house paperwork up by 24 hours. I want everything done before the weekend." I held my breath. So their plan was moving even faster than I thought. A little before 10 p.m., I made a decision. I had to take Linda out of there, that very night. I didn't know what they would do if cornered, but I knew I couldn't let Linda stay in that house for even one more night. I gently helped her put on a coat, then whispered, "Linda, we're going to Frank's place for a bit, just a few days." Frank was an old military buddy of mine, someone I trusted completely. Linda nodded, a little confused but not resisting. We went down to the garage through the back way, trying not to make any noise. But as soon as I opened the car door, the porch light snapped on. Evan stood there, arms crossed. "Dad, where are you going at this hour?" His voice sounded calm, but I saw the tight line in his jaw. "The air in the house feels suffocating," I said. "I'm taking Linda for a short drive." Evan looked at me, then at Linda. His eyes darkened just for a second. Then he gave a thin smile. "Do whatever you want. Just don't be long." I knew he realized I was trying to protect Linda, but he forced himself to hide the irritation, probably because their plan wasn't finished yet, and they didn't want to draw attention. I drove out of the driveway, keeping a steady speed even though my hands were trembling. Linda pressed a hand to the window, staring into the night like a child escaping a nightmare. "Where are we going, Harold?" "To somewhere safer, sweetheart." I brought her to Frank's house, left her in his care, and briefly explained that Linda needed a few days of rest. Frank didn't ask much, he just put a hand on my shoulder. "I'll take care of her. You do what you need to do." Driving back, The night air seeped through the window crack, cold enough to sting my chest, but my mind had never felt clearer. I knew the day of reckoning was coming. And I also knew this. This time, I wouldn't let them lay a hand on Linda ever again. Early the next morning, I went straight to the police station. The officer on duty saw the seriousness on my face and took me directly to the supervising officer. I put the USB, documents, and photocopies on her desk. I'd like to file a report. This isn't just a family matter anymore. Sergeant Harris, mid-40s, sharp eyes but calm demeanor, sat silently for nearly 10 minutes, reading every page. When she opened the kitchen recording, especially the part where Evan said he wanted to push the paperwork up by 24 hours, I saw her face tighten. "Mr. Burns," she said, slow but firm, "based on what you've provided, this may be a severe case of elder abuse, along with financial fraud and forged documents." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "My wife, Linda, she's very weak. If I hadn't taken her out last night, I don't know what would have happened." Sergeant Harris wrote everything down carefully, then asked more questions about Linda's condition in recent days. Being left without food, being given unidentified sedatives, being isolated. I told her everything, no more, no less. My voice shook at times, but I kept myself steady. I needed them to see the truth. As I was about to leave, Harris called after me, "Mr. Burns, one more thing." She slid a freshly printed background sheet across the desk. Evan hadn't worked for the past 3 months. I stared at that line for a long time. It felt like the final knife cutting through any fragile hope that this was just a moment of weakness. 3 months, which meant every time he said, working late, team meeting, work stress, he'd been lying. The officer added, "We also suspect Madison helped with the forged signatures. A lot of the documents show a woman trying to mimic a man's handwriting. If this is part of a larger scam, we may be able to add more charges." I wasn't surprised. Someone as calculating as Madison wouldn't hesitate to work behind Evan in all those dirty schemes. As I stepped toward the exit, an older man stood waiting in the hallway. He looked nervous when he saw me. "You're Harold Burns, right?" I nodded. He glanced around, then pulled me aside. "I'm Henry. I think I'm also a victim of your son." Henry handed me a worn stack of documents, bank statements, emails from Evan Burns, financial guidance. Evan had promised him fixed monthly returns, safe investments, real estate-backed guarantees. I recognized the pattern immediately. It was the same Ponzi structure Evan was involved in. "I lost almost $60,000, Henry whispered. "The police told me to bring more evidence if I had it. When I heard them mention your name, I thought I should come." I thanked him. Not just because he brought evidence, but because his story confirmed my worst fear. Evan wasn't only deceiving his parents, he was targeting other seniors, people who trusted him just as I once did. I went back inside and handed everything Henry gave me to the police. Sergeant Harris said, "With this new evidence, we'll request an arrest warrant within 24 to 48 hours. You did the right thing coming in, Mr. Burns." Her words eased me a little, but not enough to calm me. Evan was desperate, and a desperate man can do anything. I left as dusk settled. I drove home only to pick up Linda's remaining things, clothes, medication, a few personal items. If the police arrested Evan that night, good. But if not, I wanted Linda to have everything she needed without returning to the house. My home sat at the end of a quiet street. The maple tree in the yard holding on to a few late winter leaves. I parked 2 houses away. I wanted to watch first, an instinct I had learned after days of suspicion. As I walked closer, my chest tightened. Evan's car, parked right in front of the house. Lights off. No one outside. No sound inside. The whole house was dark, but I could feel something waiting in that silence, an unnatural stillness, unlike any night before. I swallowed hard. I wasn't afraid of the dark. But I knew that when my son was cornered, he could become someone I no longer recognized. I stood at the gate, hand on the latch, heart pounding. I sensed something terrible about to happen. I opened the gate quietly, stepping into the yard like a stranger feeling his way through his own home. The silence was so deep I could hear the wind scraping along the eaves. But the moment I turned the key in the front door, the door was yanked open from inside. Evan lunged at me. His eyes were bloodshot, hair messy, breath ragged like he'd been running. But what terrified me wasn't the chaos, it was the look of a man so desperate he no longer saw right or wrong. "Dad," his voice cracked, "you ruined everything for me." He snatched the keys from my hand, slammed the door shut, and shoved the keys into his pocket. I stepped back to keep distance. "Evan, listen to me." "No!" He cut me off, stepping closer. "When you turned that stuff in to the police, you shoved me into prison with your own hands. I don't have any choices left." I heard the back door close softly. Madison emerged from the shadows of the living room. She stood near the heater, hands trembling, but her eyes darted like someone looking for an escape, not for the truth. "Evan," she whispered, "hurry. If he doesn't sign today, they'll freeze everything." I looked at both of them, my son, and the woman I once tried to believe was only a little materialistic, and I understood something. They didn't see me as a father or anything else. To them, I was the final obstacle. Evan pulled a stack of papers from his pocket. "Just sign this and we're done. I'll take care of Linda. You just need to cooperate." I didn't have to look. It was either the house transfer, the bank authorization, or a fresh power of attorney meant to erase me entirely. "I won't sign." I said it slow and clear, each word like a blade. Evan tightened his grip on the papers, then suddenly shoved me so hard I couldn't keep my balance. My back slammed into the edge of the wooden table, pain shooting down my shoulder. I tried not to cry out, pushing myself up. Madison screamed, her voice sharp and shrill. "Evan, hurry! If he doesn't sign, we lose everything." Evan lunged and tried to force the papers into my hand. "Sign it," I said, "sign it." I backed toward the corner of the room. The cold wood floor under my feet reminded me of the phone on the counter by the kitchen. If I could reach it, I turned, trying to crawl toward the kitchen, but Evan rushed after me and shoved me down again. My knee hit the floor hard. He stood between me and the phone, breathing heavily. "You think you won already? You think sending a few emails is enough?" He let out a low, unstable laugh. Madison pushed from behind. "Evan, do it. Tonight's the last chance." The room felt smaller. I saw Linda's trembling legs from when they locked her in the wine cellar, her terrified eyes when she said, "Harold, they left me hungry." And in that moment, the pain from the fall didn't matter anymore. I looked straight at Evan. "I'm not afraid of you, and I won't sign anything." At that moment, a soft click sounded from the kitchen. Evan jerked his head toward it. I recognized the signal instantly. The recorder I placed in the kitchen set to trigger an emergency alert to Daryl and the police whenever it was moved. Someone had touched it, or it had detected a loud noise. Seconds later, pounding on the front door echoed through the house. "Police! Open the door! Evan's face went pale. Madison pressed her back to the wall, covering her mouth. The second knock was harder, then the door burst open. Two officers entered, one shining a flashlight at us, the other signaling to stop. Evan Burns, you are under arrest for suspected elder abuse, financial fraud, and assaulting a family member. Evan turned to me, rage and desperation clashing in his eyes. Dad, you'll pay for betraying me. He stepped back, but the officers were already on him, handcuffing him in seconds. Madison was cuffed right after when she tried to hide the papers. As Evan was led outside, he looked back at me. The look in his eyes wasn't the son I used to know, it was a man ready to blame the whole world to hide what he'd done. I stood still, my knee throbbing, my shoulder aching. But I could breathe a long, heavy breath that loosened a weight that had sat on my chest for months. The door closed behind them, the siren fading in the distance. For the first time in a long while, I knew. That night, Linda was safe. 2 weeks after Evan and Madison were arrested, the case was officially transferred to the district attorney's office. When I saw the thick file they placed in front of me, I understood this was no longer a private family issue, it was a real criminal case, with charges far more serious than even I expected. They were both charged with unlawful confinement of an elderly person, elder abuse, financial fraud and document forgery, conspiracy to seize property. Looking at that list, I didn't know whether to feel relieved that justice was coming or heartbroken that my own son was the one facing it. What hurt most was that Linda couldn't testify. The forensic psychologist concluded she didn't have the cognitive capacity anymore because her Alzheimer's had become unstable after the trauma. Hearing that, I had to sit for a moment, my chest heavy as stone. Linda, the person who had witnessed the most, couldn't say a word. I became the primary witness. I submitted everything. The recording of Evan saying, "Push the paperwork up by 24 hours," the photo of the forged $200,000 loan, Madison's emails with Harlan, the neighbor's video showing Evan blocking the door when I wasn't home, the massively undervalued home appraisal. At the first hearing, Evan was escorted in, handcuffed, gaunt, but the fire in his eyes was still there, just like the night he rushed at me. Evan's attorney tried arguing that I had set him up, that the recordings were inadmissible because they were made inside the home without notice. But Prosecutor Chen, a small woman with a voice sharp as a blade, shut that down immediately. Mr. Burns did not set anyone up. He recorded to protect his wife from unlawful confinement. Given the victim's condition, this is entirely within lawful self-defense. Evan clenched his jaw, turning toward me. "Dad, you really want to destroy me?" I didn't answer. I refused to let the pain inside me be used against me. Then something shifted in the room. Henry, the man who met me at the station, walked inside. He testified clearly about how Evan tricked him into the Ponzi scheme, showed emails, bank transfers, and the contract promising him a 30% monthly return. His testimony changed the atmosphere immediately. It wasn't a family dispute anymore. It was a pattern of fraud, systematic and ongoing. Then came Madison's turn. She entered with smudged mascara, trembling hands, voice wavering between sobs and forced innocence. Evan pressured me. I didn't want to. I only followed along. I thought he was trying to help the family. But the prosecutor projected a message from Madison to Harlan. Appraisal lowered. Push it through before the old man gets more suspicious. The room fell silent. Madison covered her face as if she could hide from her own words. Then the prosecutor played the audio. I had heard many times but could never get used to. Evan's cold, calculated voice. "Leave Mom in the basement for a few more days. She'll forget everything. Just leave her." No one in the courtroom moved. The jury looked at Evan with a mix of shock, anger, and disbelief, the kind of look people give when they see just how far a person can fall from humanity. Evan's lawyer stumbled. There was no way out. No one left to blame, not me, not Linda. The judge spoke briefly. "The defendant will remain in custody pending trial. Bail is denied." The sound of the gavel made me flinch. Everyone in the courtroom stood. Evan was escorted toward the door, his wrists cuffed in front of him. But before he disappeared, he turned and looked at me, a look filled with resentment, and at the same time, the look of someone who had lost everything. In that moment, I suddenly realized I had lost my son long ago. Not on the night the police rushed in, not on the day I found Linda in the cellar, but the moment Evan chose money over family and let ambition erase whatever humanity he had left. I walked out of the courtroom. The gray Toronto afternoon cast a dull shade over everything, yet inside me was a different kind of stillness, a deep sadness, but also a strange sense of release. Evan's true self had finally surfaced, and Lindsay, the woman of my life, was safe, while justice had begun to move. The main trial began at the start of spring, when Toronto's cold still lingered and the tree branches stood bare with gray veins running through them. I walked to the courthouse every day, carrying Linda's small notebook in my coat pocket to steady myself. The trial lasted nearly a month longer than I expected, heavier than anything I had ever lived through. Evan's defense attorney tried to spin a different story, that Evan committed fraud out of financial desperation, that losing his job suddenly had pushed him into crisis, that he only wanted to protect the family home. Listening to all of that made my chest tighten. Desperation never justifies locking your own mother in a wine cellar for 2 weeks. Never justifies attacking your father, forging signatures, or forcing medication on a sick woman. Then came Madison's turn. She cried more than anyone in the courtroom. Every time she stood to speak, she looked around as if searching for someone to rescue her. She said she was controlled by her husband, that she couldn't handle the situation, that she only went along because she was scared Evan would get angry. But Prosecutor Chen read the evidence one by one. The messages Madison sent to Harlan, her attempts to mimic Linda's handwriting, the sedatives she purchased, the neighbor's testimony that she blocked the door and refused to let anyone check on Linda. No one believed Madison was innocent. She hadn't been forced, she had participated, step by step. I sat still, not pleased when evidence piled up against them. No one wins in a story like this. There is only loss and pain. When the judge read the final list of charges, Evan was found guilty on all counts: elder abuse, unlawful confinement, financial fraud, document forgery, and assaulting a family member. Madison was convicted on lesser charges because she hadn't directly attacked me, but she was still held responsible for participating in Linda's confinement and helping fabricate documents. Sentencing day fell in the middle of April. The courtroom was so quiet I could hear the wind whistling through the hallway. The judge looked at Evan for a long moment before reading the sentence. "What you did is not only legally wrong," she said. "It is a profound betrayal of the people who gave you life and raised you." Evan bowed his head, but I didn't see remorse, only the tension of someone who still believed he was the victim. "Mr. Evan Burns," the judge said clearly, The court sentences you to 15 years in prison. Madison gripped the bench, tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Madison Burns, the judge continued, the court sentences you to 7 years in prison. No one clapped. No one sighed with relief. No one called it a victory. I simply stood and watched Evan being led away in handcuffs. His eyes passed over mine, empty, like someone who had lost everything but still couldn't see that most of it was caused by himself. I stepped into the hallway, feeling the spring breeze light but cold brush past me. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I only felt a vast emptiness open inside my chest. What happened over the past months had taken a part of my soul, something no court sentence could ever return. That evening, I went to Frank's house to pick up Linda. She was sitting on a blue cushioned chair, holding the teddy bear I bought Evan when he was still a child. Linda looked up and smiled when she saw me, but she didn't ask a single question about the trial. Not, "Where's Evan?" Not, "How did it go?" Alzheimer's had taken more from her than I expected, but when I tucked her blanket up later that night, Linda suddenly held my hand and quietly asked, "Will Evan be home for dinner?" I froze. I couldn't tell her the truth. Not to Linda. Not to her fragile heart. I sat beside her, placed my hand on her graying hair, and said, "No, Linda, but we still have each other." She smiled softly, closed her eyes, as if that answer was enough to settle her heart. I watched the woman who had walked beside me for more than 40 years hurt, betrayed, yet gentle as ever. 15 years or 7 years, none of that could return what we lost. But at least justice now had a face, and I still had the one thing that mattered most: Linda. In the quiet room, only her, steady breathing, and my heartbeat echoed softly, reminding me that, after everything, we still had one thing left to hold on to. We still had each other. After the trial, I thought everything would feel lighter. But just a few weeks later, I realized the legal battle was over, yet Linda's battle with her illness was slipping down a steep slope, one so cold and sudden that some nights I could barely breathe. Linda declined quickly, so quickly I couldn't brace myself for it. Some mornings she'd sit by the window for a long time, then ask, "Why isn't Evan coming home?" I held her hand and looked out at the trees so she wouldn't see the pain in my eyes. When her condition became more unpredictable, I decided to sell our old house. Not because I wanted to forget the past, but because I no longer had the strength to take care of everything alone. I moved into a small apartment near a memory care center where doctors could keep close watch on Linda, and where she had gentle therapy sessions to preserve the little memories she had left. On the day we moved out, I walked through the old house one last time. The living room wall still had faint marks from when Evan scribbled on it with crayons at 6. I placed my hand on the wall. It felt cold, but the memories didn't. Yet some things, no matter how dear, can't be held forever. In the new apartment, I tried to find my rhythm again. Nothing much, just morning walks around the lake, short conversations with older neighbors, and joining a community group that protects seniors from abuse. I told Linda's story not to reopen wounds, but to remind people that silence is sometimes the cruelest thing. Every day I visited the center. Every day I told Linda the story of how we met at a summer music festival in 1979, how beautiful she was, with her soft curls and yellow dress, and how I watched her for 3 songs before I found the courage to walk over. Some days she laughed and said, "You were such a shy boy." Some days she looked puzzled and asked, "Who are you again?" When that happened, I just smiled and said, "I'm the man who has loved you the longest in this life." Every so often, Madison sent letters of apology. The words sounded full of regret, saying she was blinded, manipulated by Evan. I never read more than 3 lines. I tore them up. Forgiveness doesn't live on a few sheets of paper. And even though I tried not to let my heart turn to stone, I couldn't reopen the door of the past for someone who had helped poison my wife's life. One June afternoon, I received an official notice from the district attorney's office. Most of the assets were gone and couldn't be recovered. The funds Evan and Madison withdrew had vanished into the Ponzi scheme used to pay earlier investors, and part of it sent to accounts overseas. I folded the letter, set it on the table, and sat for a long time. Not angry, not shocked, just empty. We had lost not only money, but time, memories, and the peace Linda deserved in the last years of her life. But later that afternoon, when I visited the center, Linda was sitting by a window, holding a small radio. She was playing Moon River, the song that played the first night we danced together. I stopped in the doorway and just watched her. She didn't remember the song's name, didn't remember why it mattered to us. She might not even have remembered who I was in that moment, but she smiled, a soft, peaceful smile, as if the song whispered something beautiful from a distant memory that even Alzheimer's couldn't fully erase. I sat beside her saying nothing, just placed my hand over hers, and I understood. Justice doesn't heal, but it stops the hurt from happening again. It doesn't bring back the days Linda spent locked in the dark, doesn't bring back the mornings she panicked because she didn't recognize me, but it stopped those people from hurting her ever again. Linda tilted her head with the music, the evening sun catching her silver hair like a thin halo. I squeezed her hand gently. "Linda," I whispered, "we still have each other. Even if the past was stolen, even if our time is growing short, even if her world flickers between clarity and fog, we still have each other. And sometimes that's enough." Some evenings I sit by Linda's bed, watching her sleep, and my heart sinks as if I'm standing at the edge of time. Her face looks peaceful, lips slightly parted, her breathing steady, but something about the way the light falls on her silver hair makes me wonder, how much time do we have left? How many more evenings will I get to sit here and watch her like this? Any old husband who has walked through what I have would know this kind of fear. Not the fear of losing Linda, but the fear that one morning she'll wake up and look at me as a stranger forever. Sometimes that fear hurts more than death. I don't avoid thinking about Evan. I can't. Even though Evan is now somewhere I can hardly imagine, I still remember the moment I looked into my son's eyes in the courtroom, the moment I realized I had lost him long ago. Not when he lied, not when he locked Linda away, but when greed changed him bit by bit, right in front of me, without me noticing. But I'm not angry anymore. I don't have room for hatred, not when each day I need my strength to keep Linda tethered to reality. Anger can't nourish compassion, and compassion is what I need to finish this road. Many nights, I sit in the small apartment with just the warm yellow lamp on, reading news, sometimes coming across reports of elder abuse. Someone left alone in a cold house. Someone tricked out of their life savings. Someone pushed into a care facility and never visited again. Every story cuts like a new wound, reminding me how many people have been treated like burdens. I hope my story, our story, reaches someone before it's too late. I hope someone looks at their parents and sees a person, a history, a lifetime of sacrifice, not an inconvenience. Sometimes Linda still asks, on days when her mind brightens a little, "Where's our son, sweetheart?" That question squeezes my heart like a hand that refuses to let go. But I can't let the truth crush her. I stroke her hair and say, "He's gone far away, Linda." And she nods, a small, light nod, as if accepting that some children simply don't come home. I understand now that justice isn't revenge, even if it sometimes feels like that. Justice means the wrongdoer is held accountable, so the hurt doesn't repeat. Justice protects others from going through what Linda did. Justice means Linda no longer fears the dark, no longer fears the sound of a locked door, no longer fears the footsteps of her own son. And love, real love, is standing up to protect someone who can no longer protect themselves. No shouting, no force, just a steady heart that says, "No, she deserves to live in peace." Tonight, before leaving the center, I watched Linda sleep and told myself that despite all the loss, life still left me one gift: the chance to be beside her until her last breath. And if you're still here, listening to this story, I want to say this with all the sincerity of an old man who has just survived the biggest storm of his life. Thank you. Thank you for giving your time to the story of an old man who has little left to brag about, little left to hold on to, just memories, love, and the truth. You don't know how much that means. At my age, we don't need much, just someone willing to listen. If you can, tell me where you're watching from. I like imagining that my story travels through cities, small towns, and warm kitchens where older folks sit with their evening cup of tea. And if this story made you think about something, a memory, a loved one, a difficult truth, leave a comment. I'll read every word, the way I flip through Linda's old diary pages to remember our best days. If you'd like to hear more true life stories, stories of pain, awakening, kindness, and justice, please hit like, leave a few words, or subscribe so we can walk this path together. I'm grateful for every one of you who stayed until the end. Thank you for letting me finish my story.